It's Christmas morning, 1994. A teenager in New Jersey unwraps a large, flat box and finds something that looks like someone took a compact disc and left it in a room full of radiation. It's 12 inches across, like the size of a vinyl record, and it's silver, and it catches the light in a way that makes it look genuinely futuristic. His father, who researched this purchase for 3 months, explains that this is the best picture quality available on any home format in the world, that it sounds better than VHS, that this is the future of home video. He was right about all of it. The LaserDisc was technically superior in almost every measurable way to everything competing against it. And it lost anyway, completely, decisively. And the reasons why tell you something important about how technology actually spreads or doesn't. The LaserDisc was on the market for over 2 decades. At its peak, it had millions of devoted owners, the passionate loyalty of film directors, and a picture quality that VHS couldn't touch. It was used in classrooms, in arcades, in surgical training rooms, and when DVD arrived and finished it off in the late 1990s, almost no one mourned it publicly because almost no one had owned one. By the end, the LaserDisc had captured less than 2% of the American home video market. What happened between technically superior in every way and 2% market share is one of the most instructive stories in the history of consumer technology. Here it is. The LaserDisc didn't emerge from a consumer electronics lab in the 1970s. It was actually conceived in the 1960s by a physicist named David Paul Gregg, who filed patents for a video disc system as early as 1961. The core idea, using a laser beam to read encoded information from a reflective disc, was genuinely revolutionary at a time when most video recording technology still relied on magnetic tape and physical contact between the reader and the medium. MCA, the entertainment conglomerate, acquired Gregg's patents and began developing the format through the late 1960s and early 1970s in partnership with Philips, the Dutch electronics company. The system they eventually brought to market was called DiscoVision when it launched in Atlanta in December 1978, about a year after the VHS and Betamax battle was already underway. That timing matters. The LaserDisc entered a market that was already forming habits. Consumers were already renting VHS tapes. Retailers were already building infrastructure around magnetic tape. The LaserDisc arrived not into a blank market it could define, but into a market that was already mid-conversation. And it arrived with a price tag that immediately limited who could join it. A Pioneer LaserDisc player in 1980 cost roughly $750, equivalent to around $2,800 today. A VHS player cost about $200. The discs themselves were priced comparably to what we'd now consider collector's editions, not rental commodities. From the very first day, the LaserDisc was positioned, by pricing if nothing else, as a premium product for a narrow audience. The most technically advanced product in a market doesn't automatically win. It wins only if it can reach enough people at a price they're willing to pay, and the LaserDisc never solved that equation. Set aside the price for a moment, because it's worth understanding just how significant the quality difference actually was. VHS operated on an analog recording system that introduced visible degradation. The soft edges, the color bleed, the static noise and dark scenes that anyone who grew up in the 1980s and 90s will immediately recognize. Every time you rewound and rewatched a VHS tape, the quality degraded slightly. After enough viewings, the picture on a well-loved tape looked like it was being transmitted through a light fog. LaserDisc used an analog optical system that had none of those problems. There was no physical contact between the laser and the disc surface, which meant no wear, no degradation with repeated viewings. The resolution was roughly 425 lines, compared to VHS's 240. The color reproduction was dramatically more accurate. The audio, particularly on discs encoded with digital audio tracks, was substantially better than anything tape could deliver. Directors noticed. Criterion Collection, the label that would later become synonymous with definitive scholarly home video releases, built its entire early business model around LaserDisc. Stanley Kubrick personally supervised the LaserDisc transfer of 2001, A Space Odyssey. James Cameron used LaserDisc versions of films during production meetings on The Terminator and Aliens because the image quality was good enough to reference for color grading decisions. Roger Ebert wrote publicly about his LaserDisc collection and the experience of watching films the way directors intended them to be seen. This created a devoted community of enthusiasts who treated LaserDisc ownership the way audiophiles treat high-end audio equipment, as a commitment to experiencing the medium correctly, not just conveniently. And that community, passionate as it was, turned out to be the format's ceiling rather than its foundation. Superior quality creates loyal advocates, but loyalty alone doesn't build a mass market. And the LaserDisc's quality advantage attracted exactly the kind of audience that was too small to save it. Here is the thing about the LaserDisc that no amount of marketing could fix, that no price reduction could fully overcome, that lived at the absolute center of every consumer's hesitation. You couldn't record on it. A LaserDisc was a read-only medium. You could play back pre-recorded content with extraordinary fidelity. You could not tape a football game. You could not record a TV show to watch later. You could not tape your child's birthday party and then watch it on the same machine that played your movies. The recorder and the player were, for the entire life of the format, two completely separate and expensive devices. And a consumer LaserDisc recorder that ordinary people could afford never arrived. This sounds like a minor inconvenience until you consider what VHS was actually selling. VHS wasn't just selling movie playback. It was selling control over time. The ability to record anything, watch it whenever you wanted, and tape over it when you were done. This was a genuinely transformative capability for ordinary households in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The Supreme Court had to rule in the landmark 1984 Sony versus Universal City Studios case that home recording for personal use was legal. That's how significant the behavior was becoming. LaserDisc owners couldn't participate in any of that. They had a beautiful playback device and nothing else. In Japan, where the format performed considerably better than in the West, the combination of a VHS recorder and a LaserDisc player in the same household was common. People used each format for what it did best. In America, most consumers looked at the price of both devices and bought just one. And the one that could record won that calculation almost every time. A format that does one thing brilliantly will always struggle against a format that does two things adequately. Because most consumers are optimizing for flexibility, not perfection. If you wanted to understand why the LaserDisc failed in America while gaining meaningful market share in Japan and Hong Kong, you had to look at how movies were consumed, and specifically at the video rental industry. By the mid-1980s, video rental stores were everywhere in America. Blockbuster opened its first location in 1985 and was expanding at a pace that reshaped retail geography. The economics of video rental were built entirely around VHS. The cassettes were durable enough to rent repeatedly, cheap enough to stock in quantity, and returnable without special handling. LaserDiscs were fragile relative to VHS tapes. They were large, difficult to store efficiently in retail environments, designed around cassette-sized inventory, and expensive enough that rental stores had little incentive to invest in them when VHS was already generating reliable revenue. Some specialty stores, particularly in major cities and near universities, stocked LaserDiscs, and that niche rental market served the format's core enthusiast audience reasonably well. But it never scaled. The rental gap created a self-reinforcing loop. Consumers didn't buy LaserDisc players partly because they couldn't rent discs easily. Stores didn't stock discs partly because consumer penetration was too low to justify the investment. Pioneer, which had become the dominant LaserDisc hardware manufacturer after MCA and Philips struggled, tried various strategies to break this loop, subsidizing disc production, partnering with film studios for exclusive releases, expanding the software catalog to over 10,000 titles by the early 1990s. None of it cracked the rental infrastructure problem. In Japan, where the rental market had different economics and the format launched with stronger retail support, LaserDisc penetration reached roughly 10% of households at its peak. Still not dominant, but enough to sustain a genuine market for years. In America, it never exceeded 2%. The infrastructure mattered as much as the technology, and the infrastructure had already chosen a side. Technology adoption isn't just about the product, it's about the entire ecosystem around the product. And ecosystems, once established, are extraordinarily difficult to displace. By the mid-1990s, the LaserDisc had settled into a stable but permanently marginal existence. Its devotees were real and genuinely passionate. The software catalog was extensive. Pioneer continued releasing new hardware, and Criterion continued producing definitive disc editions of important films. It wasn't dying exactly, and it was persisting, in the way that formats with committed niche audiences can persist for a long time. Then DVD was announced, the digital versatile disc, developed by a consortium that included Sony, Philips, Panasonic, and Toshiba. Launched in Japan in late 1996 and in America in 1997. It was smaller than a LaserDisc, cheaper to manufacture, capable of storing a full feature film on a single side without requiring a disc flip, and it produced digital video quality that was genuinely competitive with LaserDisc's analog output, critically. And this was the move that sealed the LaserDisc's fate. DVD players launched at $599, dropped to $299 within a year, and hit mass market price points by $19.99. The format achieved in 3 years what LaserDisc had failed to achieve in 20, genuine mainstream penetration. By 2000, DVD was outselling VHS in some retail categories. By 2003, it had effectively won. Pioneer, to its credit, did something remarkable in the transition. Rather than abandoning its engineering legacy, it combined the two formats into a single player, the DVD/LaserDisc combo unit, that allowed longtime LaserDisc owners to migrate to DVD without immediately discarding their existing collections. It was a graceful exit ramp, and it reflected genuine respect for the customer base that had sustained the format through 2 difficult decades. What LaserDisc left behind is more significant than its market share suggests. The Criterion Collection, which began as a LaserDisc label, survived the format transition and became the most respected home video label in the world. Its approach to supplementary materials, director commentaries, and scholarly essays was developed entirely on LaserDisc before DVD existed. The concept of the director's commentary track, now standard on virtually every home video release, was pioneered on LaserDisc. Interactive menus, chapter selection, widescreen presentation as a selling point rather than an apology. All of these became standard home video features because LaserDisc proved consumers would pay for them. The format lost the market but won the culture, and the home video experience we take for granted today is built substantially on foundations that LaserDisc laid. The LaserDisc was right about almost everything. It was right that picture quality mattered. It was right that films deserved to be presented in their original aspect ratios. It was right that supplementary material and director commentary would become things consumers valued. It was right about all of it. And it still lost, because being right about the destination doesn't guarantee you survive the journey there. That teenager in New Jersey still has his father's LaserDisc collection in a storage unit. About 400 discs. He hasn't played one in 20 years. He's also never thrown them away. Some things earn a kind of loyalty that outlasts their usefulness. And that might be the most human thing about the LaserDisc story. If you find these stories worth telling, the formats that lost, the technologies that arrived too early, the things that shaped the world without getting credit for it, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new one lands every week. I'll see you there.